Leilani Thomas stepped into the gleaming marble lobby of the Grand Avalon Hotel, the afternoon sun glinting off crystal chandeliers that hung like stars above. Her cotton dress, simple and damp with sweat from the brisk journey across town, clung lightly to her arms. The plush red velvet couches and towering floral arrangements filled the space with quiet opulence, the air scented faintly with jasmine and polished wood. The joyful hum of hushed conversations mixed with the soft clink of fine china from the distant cafe. She moved with quiet determination but kept her head low, trying to blend in despite the plainly practical flats on her feet and the modest tote slung carelessly on her shoulder. Beneath the calm surface, a small flutter of nerves stirred. It was rare for someone in her unassuming attire to walk freely in a place where suits cost more than her rent, where every smile seemed measured and every gesture polished with trained grace. Heads turned as she passed. A sharply dressed elderly gentleman arched an eyebrow, sharing a look with his companion. A young woman in a silver gown nudged her friend and whispered something. Voices barely contained murmurs, a ripple of stifled laughter caught. Some hotel guests glanced openly with a mixture of disdain and amusement, their eyes sweeping over Leilani's sweat-streaked dress and worn shoes. She noted the subtle narrowing of eyes, the slow turning away, the quiet placement of champagne glasses between them, excluding her from their circle. Behind the concierge desk, Maxwell, the sharply dressed concierge, stared at Leilani with an appraising gaze, his lips pressed tight. His eyes scanned her damp sleeves, frayed bag, and hesitant posture. His expression hardened into suspicion, a quiet judgment passing over his face as if she were a puzzle that didn't belong in the room. Nearby, a woman in an expensive emerald dress smirked loudly. "Looks like someone stumbled into the wrong place," she sneered to her companion, prompting a few light chuckles that echoed faintly through the lobby's hushed grandeur. Maxwell approached Leilani with a forced smile, the kind that barely disguised his cool appraisal. His posture was rigid, hands clasped neatly in front of him like a guard at a fortress. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, voice laced with polite suspicion, "can I assist you? Are you certain you're in the right place? This hotel is reserved for registered guests, private events, and members only." Leilani lifted her chin subtly but maintained a calm tone, steady despite the tight knot of anxiety in her stomach. "Yes, I am here as a guest. I intend to check in and enjoy the facilities. The hotel promised me a reservation." Maxwell's lips curled into a faint, condescending smirk. "A reservation," he repeated, emphasizing the last word like it was an absurd joke. "You seem rather out of place, ma'am. This isn't exactly a place for people who appear, shall I say, unprepared." He gestured subtly toward her dress, damp and plain, and then to her flushed and sweaty face. "I'm afraid we cannot accommodate guests not meeting our dress code, or those who present themselves in a manner inconsistent with our clientele." A gathering crowd had begun to notice the exchange. Discreet glances lurched to stares, students of society quickly shifted their attention like a flock sensing weakness. One tall man with a besooted aura pulled out his phone under the pretense of catching a hotel tour, camera subtly trained on Leilani. Behind Maxwell, the murmurs grew louder. From across the room came a stifled laugh. A woman in a sharp black dress, seated near the window, called out with a sneer, "Maybe she's one of the cleaning staff? Sweaty from working hard, trying to sneak a break?" Her words dripped with derision. A few nearby guests snorted in agreement, sharing knowing glances that only deepened Leilani's humiliation. The man with the phone chuckled quietly, zooming in on Leilani's flustered form. Leilani's heart pounded fiercely. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, yet she kept her voice soft but firm. "I assure you, I am here as a guest. There is no mistake." Her eyes flickered briefly with frustration, but she swallowed hard. The room was too hostile, too sharp. Maxwell folded his arms, clearly enjoying his small show of authority. "Well, regardless of your assertion, our policy stands. You are welcome to leave through the service entrance or wait in the lounge designated for bona fide guests, but we cannot allow any disruption to our environment." His voice had dropped to a tone both dismissive and cold. Leilani's face flushed deeper, warmth pooling behind her ears. She fixed Maxwell with a steady look, trying to anchor herself against the rising tide of public scrutiny. Then, without another word, a staff member dressed in a crisp black uniform approached behind Maxwell and lightly tapped Leilani's arm. "Miss, if you would please come with me," he said quietly but firmly. Leilani hesitated for the barest moment, then nodded, turning away from the hostile gazes. She walked stiffly past the plush couches and gilded pillars, her shoulders squared though her mind swirled with shame. Whispers followed her like shadows. "Did you see her shoes?" one woman murmured, pathetic. "And so sweaty, like she just ran a marathon." Another guest added, "I don't even think she's aware of how out of place she is." Leilani's throat tightened. Her breath caught when she noticed several smartphones pointed discreetly at her back. The quiet laughter rose in volume. She briefly glanced over her shoulder, catching the pitying eyes of a hotel maid who quickly looked away, unwilling or unable to intervene. Not a single affluent guest made a move to intervene. The crowd bore witness to her fall. They led her to a narrow corridor behind the grand lobby. The echo of her footsteps seemed heavier here, swallowed by the stark walls and dimmer lights. The staff member opened a plain side door, beyond which only the service elevator and staff break room existed. There was no plush velvet or fragrant flowers, only the muted hum of fluorescent bulbs. "You can wait here," the staffer said with an apologetic, almost whispered tone. "Someone will be with you shortly." Leilani nodded, hands folded tightly in front of her. The door closed softly behind her, sealing away the cold world of gleaming crystal and whispered judgments. She leaned her back against the wall and closed her eyes briefly, swallowing the lump of humiliation knotting her throat. Through the thin walls, muffled laughter and the clinking of glasses filtered faintly. The echo of the hotel's luxury felt like a cruel insult. For all her resolve and poise, a single tear slipped from the corner of her eye before she hastily wiped it away. She breathed in slowly, steadying herself against the weight of the moment, desperate not to crumble beneath the glare of unseen spectators. Minutes stretched, silent and unyielding. Leilani's mind replayed every word, every slight, each sneer and cruel whisper. The room beyond continued its festivities, anchoring her further in her isolation. She was there, humiliated, ignored, an invisible outsider in a place that should have welcomed her. Suddenly, a soft knock interrupted the heavy silence, and footsteps approached from the corridor. The door opened again, and she straightened immediately, wary but ready for whatever came next. In a sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the bustling lobby, Maxwell rubbed his temples as the hotel manager, Mr. Collins, leaned forward, fingers steepled with an expression of cold satisfaction. The late morning sun streamed in, casting long shadows over the polished mahogany desk, symbols of power and decorum intrinsic to the Grand Avalon's elite image. "Maxwell," Mr. Collins began smoothly, his voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who believed himself the guardian of refinement. "I've reviewed your handling of the situation in the lobby. You acted decisively. There's no room for those who threaten the reputation we've cultivated. This establishment thrives on exclusivity. We cannot afford artists or owners showing up drenched in sweat, dressed like the common city folk. It undermines everything our patrons expect." Maxwell nodded solemnly, the tension in his jaw easing as he accepted the praise. "Thank you, sir. It was necessary. That woman did not belong there, and I made sure everyone observed that. We're protecting the brand, maintaining order. It's impossible to have someone so obviously out of place wandering freely. Mr. Cullen's lips twitched into a knowing smile. Precisely. We're not just running a hotel, we're preserving an atmosphere, an experience. Imposters, no matter their background, chip away at that illusion. Satisfied with their mutual understanding, Maxwell left the office with renewed confidence, ready to slip seamlessly back into the polished rhythms of service. In the lobby, the laughter tinkled again, melded with the faint clink of champagne glasses and the soft murmur of high society chatter, as if the earlier disruption had been nothing more than a fleeting shadow. The guests' smiles returned, the gravitational pull of wealth and elegance reasserted. Meanwhile, in the serene seclusion of the hotel's garden lounge, Leilani sat quietly at a wrought iron table shaded by a blooming arbor. The cool spring air brushed against her flushed skin, softly drying the lingering sweat on her forearms. Though her breath still came in uneven motors, her carefully controlled posture betrayed nothing of the stinging humiliation she carried within. Her fingers tightened around the ceramic mug of chamomile tea, the warmth comforting but unable to melt the knot in her chest. She glanced up, eyes tracing the intricate lattice of vines overhead, aiming to anchor herself above the wave of feelings threatening to rise. Anger flickered, sharp and sudden, but she swallowed it down. This place, with all its pomp, had just shown its true face. As she sipped, a neatly pressed assistant emerged from the shaded path, clipboard in hand and a polite expression fixed like a mask. "Mrs. Thomas?" he asked softly, his voice careful and respectful. Leilani looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing her features before she nodded. "Yes, that's me." The assistant offered a slight bow. "Mr. Collins, the hotel manager, requests your presence in the main lobby. There are guests awaiting your introduction." A ripple of murmurs stirred through the nearby guests, some lifting their glasses in curiosity, others discreetly straightening their attire. Leilani rose slowly, steadying herself against the creeping tide of disbelief. Others around her sensed the shifting atmosphere. The gentle murmur swelled into a low buzz of speculation. Back in the lobby, the crowd had gathered near the grand staircase. The polished stone steps, usually pathways for aristocratic attire, were now the stage for the unexpected. Mr. Collins stepped forward, clearing his throat to silence the cluster of elite gaze-seekers. "It is with great pleasure," he began, voice carrying to every corner of the room, "that I formally introduce Mrs. Leilani Thomas, wife of the owner of the Grand Avalon Hotel. Mrs. Thomas could not attend the opening gala due to urgent travel, but we are honored to welcome her presence today." Gasps fluttered like startled birds. The concierge who had just moments ago dismissed her now stared slack-jawed, his confidence shattered, his eyes wide with disbelief. Fingers that had been poised to snap in ridicule faltered midair. Guests exchanged stunned glances. Phones discreetly lowered or raised, capturing an image that contrasted sharply with their previous whispers. Those who had mocked Leilani in the quiet corners found silence settling over them like an unexpected frost. Leilani stepped forward with measured grace, her breath even and calm despite the whirlwind of attention. Her simple dress and perspiring skin seemed insignificant against the calm dignity she embodied, these marks of plainness now read as badges of authenticity rather than shame. "Thank you all for your warm welcome," she said gently, voice steady and clear, echoing softly through the marble pillars. "I prefer simplicity because I believe true leadership requires presence, not pretense. Our hotel is a legacy, built not only on luxury, but on sincere hospitality and respect for every person walking through these doors." Her gaze swept the room, meeting curious eyes and averted ones alike. "My choice to dress plainly today reflects my commitment to being hands-on, no matter how demanding my day is, and a personal wish to set an example beyond appearance. I trust our true value is in how we treat others, whether guests or staff." The room swelled with a quiet understanding, a reserved yet undeniable shift from the clipped disdain of earlier. A ripple of whispered agreement passed between several guests. The sharp edges of superiority dulled under the warmth of her words and obvious genuineness. Maxwell stood frozen near the front desk, a tight knot in his throat. The manager's earlier praise had crumbled into ashes, replaced by a stinging awareness of how narrowly his judgment had missed the mark. His trained smile faltered as he unintentionally became the spectacle rather than the enforcer. This was a revelation not only for the guests but for the staff, who now questioned what true exclusivity meant. The veneer of opulence, the carefully guarded clubs of wealth, they had forgotten the most essential ingredient for prestige: respect. Leilani stepped back, allowing the spotlight to diffuse gently as the manager returned to his seat with a mixture of pride and humility. The lobby seemed to breathe again, but this time with a softer kindness and a lingering sense of humility that only a few moments ago had been absent. The moment was brief but potent, a quiet demonstration that power carried with it both responsibility and grace. The echoes of her brief speech hung in the air as the guests slowly milled around, their conversations subtly different, more thoughtful. Though the opulence of the Grand Avalon remained untouched, the chandeliers still sparkled, the velvet sofas still plush, the people within were quietly, fundamentally altered by Leilani's unyielding presence and unwavering poise. The lobby held its breath as Leilani Thomas stood near the grand staircase, every eye locked on her stately figure. Despite the still sweat clinging to her cotton dress and the faint sheen on her forehead, she radiated a quiet strength that silenced the curious murmurs that rippled through the crowd moments before. The manager, Mr. Collins, cleared his throat confidently and addressed the assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, voice steady and commanding. "Allow me to formally introduce Mrs. Leilani Thomas, the wife of the owner of the Grand Avalon Hotel, Mr. Robert Thomas." His tone carried the weight of finality, causing a ripple of gasps and surprised glances. Because of urgent business overseas, Mr. Thomas was unable to join us, so Mrs. Thomas graciously agreed to host the gathering this evening. The crowd's reaction was immediate. The woman in the emerald dress who'd mocked Leilani only minutes ago witheringly looked down, her poised smile vanished. The concierge, Maxwell, stumbled back, his earlier composure shattered as disbelief flickered across his face. His eyes flicked from Leilani to Mr. Collins in stunned silence. Whispers swelled quickly among the guests. Smartphones lowered and raised with renewed purpose. Some fumbled to capture the woman they had so callously demeaned. The room shifted like a tide, waves of realization washing over the once judgmental onlookers. Leilani stood tall, serene and composed despite the sweat on her brow and the simplicity of her attire. Her eyes met those around her, not with triumph but with grace. "Thank you," she began softly, voice clear and steady in the hush. "I know my appearance today may have surprised many of you. I flew in directly from an intense travel schedule and wanted to embrace comfort over convention." She allowed a quiet smile to grace her lips. "My choice to dress plainly is deliberate, reflecting my belief that leadership is not measured by attire or societal trappings but by integrity and purpose." Her gaze swept the room, softening hardened faces. "The Grand Avalon is more than a place of luxury, it is a reflection of our values, sincerity, hospitality, and respect for every individual, regardless of their appearance." As she spoke, a few guests nodded, their expressions shifting from skepticism to respect. The contrast was stark against the shallow exclusivity that had clouded their judgment only minutes before. Whispers began anew, this time tinged with admiration and surprise. The well-dressed man who had been filming muttered under his breath, "I never would have guessed. She carries herself with such quiet authority." Another guest, clutching a champagne flute, murmured, "It seems we all misjudged her." Maxwell's gaze remained fixed on Leilani, his face a mask of contrition and shock. The manager, noticing the transformation, leaned over and whispered a few words to the concierge, prompting Maxwell to swallow hard and nod. Leilani's calm demeanor continued as she addressed the remaining crowd. I do not see my place here as one to demand deference but to lead by example. I am honored to be here among you and hope we can all remember the importance of kindness and humility beyond appearances. Her words resonated, creating an emotional divide that left many guests reevaluating their own behavior. The woman in emerald made a small, hesitant step forward, then stopped, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Leilani returned to her seat near the staircase, still holding herself with that quiet dignity, sweat no longer a mark of weakness but a testament to her resilience. The air in the lobby had shifted, the previous whispers of derision had been replaced by murmurs of respect and curiosity. Mr. Collins stepped forward again, clearing his throat to regain control. Let this moment remind us of the true spirit of hospitality, where everyone is valued, and character shines brightest. As the evening resumed, the atmosphere felt changed. Guests moved with softer steps, conversations flowed with more genuine interest, and a few cast lingering, respectful glances at Leilani. The Grand Avalon had been defined, for so long, by its grandeur and isolation from everyday struggles. That afternoon, however, it had been reminded of something far greater, a sincere humanity embodied by the woman who had walked in, unnoticed and underestimated, only to reveal a quiet power that could not be worn or bought. Leilani rose again to mingle briefly, her presence commanding yet warm. The once bitter crowd now sought her out, eager to offer apologies and introductions that had previously seemed out of reach. She met them with kindness but never a hint of gloating, her smile genuine but unfaltering in its composure. Later, as she retreated to a quieter corner of the hotel, a few trusted staff members approached with renewed respect, their eyes bright with admiration rather than condescension. The concierge, though still visibly uneasy, avoided meeting her gaze directly but could not hide the grudging respect that had crept into his posture. Throughout the hotel, the story began to spread, not just the revelation of the owner's wife but the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. Staff whispered of her humility, guests spoke of her grace, and even those who had once mocked felt a newfound humility. Leilani's choice to embrace simplicity over glamour had transformed the narrative entirely. She had shown that strength resides not in appearances but in character, resilience, and the courage to be authentic amid grandeur. As the evening waned, the Grand Avalon hummed with a gentler energy. Its corridors no longer echoed only with clinking glasses and polite laughter but with a renewed sense of warmth and inclusivity, forever touched by the presence of a woman who, through her grace and quiet power, had reshaped its very heart. The moment Mr. Collins spoke, the room's atmosphere shifted instantly. His voice, firm and unwavering, cut through the buzz of whispered conversations, drawing all eyes to the center of the grand lobby. Maxwell, he said, a deliberate tone underscoring the weight of his words, your conduct towards Mrs. Thomas was unacceptable. This is a place of respect and dignity. I expect you to apologize to Mrs. Thomas immediately and to make amends for the harm you have caused. Maxwell's face flushed, the earlier swagger drained completely. The arrogance that had fueled his disdain now crumbled into a hollow shell of embarrassment. He cleared his throat but found his voice faltering beneath the weight of the manager's disapproval and the piercing gaze of the crowd. Slowly, painfully, he shuffled forward, eyes downcast. Mrs. Thomas, he began, voice low and hesitant, I apologize for my behavior. I was wrong to judge you. It will not happen again. A hush enveloped the room. The sincerity of his apology hung in the air, though many guests exchanged skeptical glances. Some were still wary, others impressed by the manager's swift and public reprimand. Mrs. Thomas nodded once, her expression calm, conveying a quiet grace that spoke more than words. Immediately, whispers began circulating among the guests. The crowd, previously captivated by her reveal, now turned their curious scrutiny towards Maxwell. Conversations buzzed with disapproval for his arrogance and praise for the woman who had just once again shown strength through forgiveness and dignity. Within days, the ripple effects surged beyond the hotel walls. News of the incident spread across social media platforms, where video snippets captured by onlookers circulated widely. Maxwell's dismissive treatment and sudden public chastisement became the focus. Comments poured in condemning elitism and lauding Leilani's poise. Back at the Grand Avalon, the consequences were unmistakable. Mr. Collins expelled Maxwell from all front-of-house duties, assigning him to a back-office position where guest interaction would be limited. The hotel instituted new staff training programs emphasizing inclusivity, respect, and awareness. The management team openly recognized the importance of the lesson learned, eager to repair the hotel's tarnished image. One afternoon, as the hotel corridors hummed with renewed energy, Maxwell encountered Mrs. Thomas unexpectedly near the executive lounge. His usual confident stride faltered. He avoided eye contact, a stark contrast to his previous bravado. His shoulders slumped, and his steps slowed. She looked up calmly, their eyes meeting briefly. For a moment, the world seemed to still. Her gaze bore no malice, only a quiet acknowledgement of past wrongs and unspoken forgiveness. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, conveying a strength that transcended resentment. Maxwell nodded slightly, his mouth tightening as if to find words, then chose silence. The encounter was brief but charged. It left Maxwell grounded in an unfamiliar humility, a silent reckoning with the consequences of his actions. From that day forward, Leilani Thomas moved with a serene power through the Grand Avalon corridors. The hotel that had once swiftly dismissed her was now transformed, not solely by authority, but through an enduring shift in culture sparked by her presence. Receptionists greeted her with respectful smiles, guests offered genuine greetings, and staff alike regarded her as a symbol of integrity and inclusiveness. The whispers and stares that had once followed her like shadows vanished, replaced by nods of recognition and admiration. She navigated the gleaming marble floors with a steady resolve, her simple dress no longer a mark of difference but a testament to authenticity. The Grand Avalon itself seemed altered by her. Its opulence now tempered by grace, warmth, and an unspoken promise that kindness would triumph over entitlement. The legacy of the hotel expanded, not just in gold-trimmed suites or glittering chandeliers, but in the hearts of those who walked its halls, forever marked by the enduring dignity of the woman who had quietly changed everything. As Leilani stepped out into the cool evening air, the fading sun casting a gentle glow over the city skyline, she walked forward with an unshakable confidence. Behind her, the hotel stood, a silent witness to a story that reminded all who passed through its doors that true power lies in humility, resilience, and the courage to be oneself. And quietly, without fanfare, the world around her had shifted, forever altered by her presence, her grace, and the strength of her unyielding spirit.